Hello, everyone, and welcome to Marvel-ous Movie Mondays. My internet is terrible. My other computer's crashing. I'm on my backup. So Kelsey's going to kind of drive the ship today. She's going to be the captain. You are the captain now, Kels. How you doing, Kels? Welcome to
Okay.
Marvel-ous Movie Mondays.
I'm good. Oh my god, thanks for having me, Dill.
I'm glad you're here. You're our forever guest on the show, aka our
I
co-host. Um, yeah,
I feel very welcomed on my own show. Thank you.
you're
Um I'm doing good. Saw Dune 2.
welcome. Ooh, what'd you think?
I liked it.
Cool. Yeah,
I
me
thought it
too.
was good. I thought that I don't know, it felt like I felt like the ending was a little rushed.
Hmm.
Like they built so much up in the first half of the movie and then like it all just like came to head in the second half and it felt like,
Right.
a little rushed for me.
All
But
right.
it was
Yeah.
still a really well done movie. The cast is
Mhm.
great. The visuals are amazing.
Yeah.
I'm excited for more of these. Honestly, these movies are making me want to read the book.
Yeah, I've heard the book's great. And yeah, I just love that world he builds. It's fantastic. I talked about it last episode. I haven't gotten to watch anything this week because I did an 8 show week today, this week, and we finally wrapped. So, Kelsey actually saw that
Yeah,
show, which was very nice.
you
Thank you
did.
for coming, Kelsey.
Of
But yeah,
course.
I'm burnt out. All I could watch was X-Men because that's what I had to watch, and I was like, I don't have time to watch anything else for enjoyment, even though I did enjoy this series. Before we get into it. I just want to say the news of the week and the big thing of the week is X-Men 97, obviously, which just came out. But
Mhm.
we hadn't seen the original series, and X-Men 97 is essentially the sixth season of that series. So we figured we'd go back and watch each season of the original. Um, Kelsey, do you have any more news before we get into X-Men animated series, the OGs?
Um, no, the only other news that I have, Dill, is that along with watching X-Men on Disney Plus, I've also been watching the Eras Tour on Disney Plus.
There you go.
So that's
Nice.
been honestly, I take back what I said about Dune Part 2. The best thing I watched the last week was the Eras Tour for the
How
fourth
many?
time.
I was gonna say how many times. So you've only watched it once
Well,
on Disney Plus, but you've
I
watched it
went
now.
to the con well, I went to the concert twice and I
Right.
went in theaters twice.
Mm,
And so I watched on Disney Plus once, so now that was my fifth time seeing it, and there will be
there you go.
more.
Love it. Well, I hope my internet holds up because now we're going to get into the nitty gritty. As I said, we're doing the X-Men animated series, which aired on Fox, believe it or not, way back when in the day. It was part of your like normal Saturday morning cartoons. You know, these were 20-minute little episodes. There were frequent commercial breaks, as we see in the Disney Plus upload of them. But yeah, these were these very small episodic adventures with the X-Men. This was kind of the first big introduction to the X-Men for the world. And it is next to probably the Batman animated series, which we won't cover because we never covered DC on here. Um, it's probably the most notable animated series. For superhero fans and comic book fans, and it really just brings to life. Oh, Kelsey's on the run. Brings to life the comic books in such an interesting way. I had seen bits and pieces of the series just growing up with reruns and stuff with like the original Disney Channel. But I had never watched it canonically, like to follow the story. And there is like an overarching story, even though each kind of episode has its own story in itself. But Kelsey, what did you think as a first time watcher? Because I know you had never seen this. What did you think of your first experience watching season one, at least, of the X Men animated series?
Yeah, still. I'm a first time watcher. I didn't even realize that when I bought this shirt. This is one of the graphic tees from Target that they always have, and it just looked
Hmm.
big and comfy. And
Yeah.
this is like these are like the people like
Hmm.
from the comic book, from the animated show, like on my shirt. So now I'm not a poser anymore. But yeah, I thought that it was, I felt like it was like a really mature take on a children's cartoon
Yeah.
series. Like it's very, like the stories, like you said, are like it's not like an episodic. Like I was expecting going into it, like watching something more like Scooby Doo, where it's like every episode is a new mystery that they have to solve, and every, at the end of every episode, they reveal the masked killer or whatever, and they say I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling kids. And I thought like it was going to be more of that format, where in reality, like it doesn't even start like a typical like pilot, especially for a children's television show. Like
Mhm.
it starts with like a part 1, part 2 right out the gate, and
Mhm.
we're getting introduced to one new character, but also if you've never seen any of them, a bunch of new characters like right
Right.
away. And a lot of the stories will continue on, and characters will come back from like a few episodes ago and we'll circle back, a few episodes later. And I just like, it was like I was really appreciating the fact, like, as an adult, that it was, like, very well done, and it was, like, very obviously, there was time and attention that went into making this show, and it wasn't just, like,
Mhm.
nonsensical garbage.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and I think nowadays, like, the one weak point, if I had to say if there was one, would probably be the animation, only because it's a little dated. And not
yeah,
even that it's dated animation. The animation's great. I think just the way they had shows back in the day, we don't have HD versions of them, so the actual image quality isn't as great on Disney Plus. But like, if that's your biggest fault is that it's not in HD, then like that's a good sign, because I think what's so great about the X-Men, this is something that's been coming out a lot about this new X-Men series. Um, People are complaining on Twitter that it's too woke. And I'm like, okay, listen. I'm like, if you watch
this
the original,
series?
no, they're saying that the
Oh,
new
the
X-Men
90s.
97 is too woke
It's
because
too
it deals
woke.
with politics and it deals with, race and gender. And I'm like, wait a sec. Watch this original first season back. It is the most woke superhero stuff I've ever seen. But that's the
That
point. It's the whole
yeah,
point is that the mutants basically resemble real life issues. There's quite literally
yeah,
internment camps in this season. There is racism in this season. There is the idea of humans and mutants can't mix. Like it's very overtly political and overtly woke.
yeah,
So I think the whole like
yeah,
conversation about X-Men being woke as a revelation is so funny to me because it's always been woke. We talked about it when we watched the X-Men movies last year or a few years ago.
yeah,
X2 is all about sexuality. The kid is basically coming out to his parents that the Iceman kid is coming out to his parents that he's a mutant, which is a very
yeah,
overt metaphor. So it's one of those funny things where, like you said, it's a children's cartoon, but it takes itself so seriously to where like it's very political, it's very woke, it's got a lot to say about politics and gender and race and all that stuff. Where I think it's so refreshing to see, especially for animation. So I have always stood by the fact that I think X-Men's woke and that's why it's great. And
yeah,
I don't think that's a negative. And if people are now just realizing that, I think it's more so they think woke is a negative thing now, but it's always been woke. And I think that's the thing to
yeah,
mention is that it's always had political stuff going on. I mean, Magneto, his whole story plot is just politics. It's political. I mean, it's all
yeah,
about that. So I just thought that was very interesting reading so many reviews of this new X-Men where it's like it's too woke. I'm like, what? you know? Because that's what
yeah,
X-Men is, and that's why we love it, and that's why I think it is so unique, and that's why I hope the MCU does it a good justice because we've gotten some crappy X-Men movies, but the good X-Men movies are really great. And as far as
mhm,
this first season goes, we haven't watched the other four yet. We will, but I really think this might be the best version of X-Men there is because it stays true to the comics while also giving us that political stuff, but also just having good stories. Like I'm very invested in them because they're also so short, so it doesn't feel like they go on for too long, and they're not too convoluted. They're not trying too hard to connect to everything else while still having a through line. I do have some qualms
yeah,
with the season overall, but
sure,
yeah, like I really enjoyed this. So I'm glad we're both kind of on the same page of enjoying this going into talking about it. Because I was worried, I was like, maybe it's gonna be so dated that we're both like, but I really do
yeah.
enjoy it.
Honestly, Dylan, my concern going into it that I was gonna be very juvenile and like,
Yeah, yeah,
but it's
it is.
not. It's entertaining to watch as a young adult. So, like all these movies. And one thing that I really enjoy seeing about this is probably going to sound a little silly and like you're going to look at me and go like, "Yeah, Kelsey, duh." Because what I really enjoyed was kind of watching like the characters that I know from the live action movies that we watched the like 2 years ago. Like these were like the blueprint for them. And it's
Mhm.
kind of really funny how like really similar like the actors who have taken on these roles now are to these animated
Yeah.
characters from 1996. Like it makes me think that like maybe they all kind of watched this series before they started playing them. Like are there
Mhm.
like I would say that watching all of them, like I think the ones that are the kind of the closest like interpretation wise is definitely Hugh Jackman's Wolverine compared to this
Absolutely.
one. Like they're very, very similar costumes and all, like, flannel, big jacket, cigar, all that. And Halle Berry's Storm is
Yeah.
like very similar to this one. Obviously, Rogue is very different.
Rogue is the
On
most different
a
for
pack,
sure.
yeah, because she's portrayed by a child in the live
Right.
action movies
Well,
with Anna
and I
Paquin.
think
So
Rogue, because Jubilee is not in the films,
yeah,
and I think Rogue is what Jubilee was for this show. Because you kind of mentioned how like this
hmm
first episode we're meeting a new character, which is essentially Jubilee, who is like kind
hmm
of being introduced into this world, which I think is a really nice way to kind of ease us in, because then we can find that
yeah,
kind of audience eye into it of like, oh, this is a new person coming into it, but like the whole mutant idea is established, and like the whole all their powers and everything, like we're not seeing them all get their powers and stuff. It's more so just like her joining this group, and then through that we kind of figure out all the dynamics and the love triangles and all that, rather than just spelling it out from the beginning, which is kind of what they used Rogue for
yeah,
in the actual
live
live action.
action.
Kelsey, give me a
Yeah.
sec. My computer just finally came on, so I'm going to transfer to the other computer real quick. But keep talking.
Okay.
I will be there in just a sec. I'm listening to you now, but I'm going to pull this one up because I think.
Oh, another character that was like very accurately like recreated was Beast. That like literally it sounds like Kelsey Grammer in the animated series, and it's just amazing to me like how like accurate these like takes have become. And also
Mhm.
later on we meet a bunch of different mutants that we now know from like the Deadpool movies, and one of those mutants being Colossus, and like that's another character that I'm like they pulled him right out of the animated series and like made him for the
Yeah.
movie. Like it's
Yeah.
it's really really funny.
You can hear me,
uh
right? Where audio's good on this one?
oh yeah, I can hear you
Alright,
loud
cool.
and clear, Dale.
I know, this is a much better setup. My computer, if it gets to 0, it takes, like, an hour to reboot. That's what my problem was. I didn't charge it overnight, so it went to 0. Yeah, like, I love how you mentioned, like, the Colossus thing, because it's like there are little bit characters here and there. Like, we get very little Mystique, even though she has a big part to play in Days of Future Past in this,
Mm-hmm.
season. But, like, I feel like there's certain characters that are such mainstays in live action that we expect a little bit more from when we see them for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with time, we might see them more, and we might get more of them. But on the reverse, I like how we're getting time with characters that aren't really a huge part. Like Gambit is not a huge part of the first class kind of. He's there in first class, but he's not
Mm-hmm.
really a huge part of it. And I love that we're getting him. Even Storm, where you said the parallel is similar, but I always felt like they kind of underutilized Storm in both the iterations of first class and the mainstay X-Men. To where here I feel like she's a real vital part. She's on almost every mission. They give her
Yeah.
a lot in this season. So yeah, I like how certain characters we don't know as well we get a lot more from, and then like characters we know really well we'll start to get to know more and better as it goes along. But yeah, I think the most dead on one is Hugh Jackman and Wolverine, because it's so accurate. But even then, this Wolverine still has his own uniqueness, which I like.
Yeah.
It's even more gruff and just angry.
Yeah,
Um,
it's really funny how like this version of Wolverine in this series is basically just like only good for like throwing punches and like saying a one-liner. Like that's his
mhm.
whole thing. Is he has a lot of like quips that he says. And I told Dylan before we started recording that I did write down a quote that I just thought was like really funny or silly. Or one of them is actually like kind of like meaningful a little bit. And
Mhm.
I heard it and I was like, "Ooh," I was like, it like hit me right in the
Is this
heart.
a Wolverine
Um,
quote for every episode or just a quote?
it's not a Wolverine quote for every episode, but
Okay.
a quote. I will
Okay.
say most of them probably are Wolverine though, because he had
Okay.
just such little goofy, silly little things to say. Um, so I guess we can just like start
Yeah.
loosely with like
Yeah.
episode one.
And we're not gonna go how we normally do with like plot points
Yeah,
of the episodes. We're gonna almost kind of just talk about the episode in general, like what is the basic episode about, and do we like it? And then we can hear Kelsey's quote. We're not gonna be like, and then this scene, and then this scene, and then this scene.
right.
That'll just take too long. But I'm
Exactly.
very interested to hear this.
So, episode one premiered on, fun fact, Halloween, Saturday, October 31st, 1992.
Yeah,
Um,
Halloween morning, and these were all morning releases. So you wake up, watch X-Men, and then go about your day, which is so cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because I guess they all probably come out on a Saturday.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, wait, this one came out on a Friday. But that's so funny. Ah, what a time to be alive. So, our first episode is actually a part one of two parts, The Night of the Sentinels, part one. The characters that we get, our main cast of characters that, live in the Xavier School and work with Professor X are Cyclops, Wolverine, Rogue, Storm, Beast, Jubilee, Gambit, and of course, Professor X, but in this episode we do get introduced to Jubilee. She is the young girl that hasn't even really realized that she is a mutant. Like she just kind of has these sparky like mishap things that happen, but I guess she's just blaming it more on the technology. And we actually find out that she is a foster kid that's been taken in by these two parents who call the mutant control agency because they're like, she's a mutant, we don't know what to do with her. So now these sentinel robots are coming after her.
Yeah, almost as if
The
it symbolizes, queerness and conversion camps and all that shit. I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah,
ominous.
that's like you
Yeah.
said, Dill, like that's been the X-Men's like whole thing is that it's this very like easy metaphor that you can apply to literally any social political problem in our country, like homophobia, racism,
Right.
xenophobia, all that stuff. And it's just been presented in a really palatable way,
Yeah.
being that it's in a superhero universe. So it's really weird that people are like, this stuff is too woke. It's always been woke. Open your
Yeah.
eyes, people. Open your eyes, sheeple. Anyway,
Wow,
so the
love that.
quote that I'll just get it out of the way right now because it happens early on in the beginning of the episode. Jubilee kind of runs away from home. She runs to the mall. And she's at this arcade where her powers make the arcade game that she's playing kind of glitch out and she breaks the machine. And the guy running the arcade runs up to her and says, "Do you know how much that game costs?" And she looks at him and goes, "Yeah, a quarter." Which is
That was your quote?
yes,
I love
because
that.
it was just, like, so funny because, like, that's not what he meant. He meant, like, the
Right.
machine, and she was just like, "Oh, yeah, I put in a quarter to play it." And it
Yeah.
was just, like, this sassy little moment.
Mhm.
Also, I had to write down that when the sentinels are tracking her down, they, like, kinda scan her body and, like, we're in the point of view of one of the sentinel robots, and they get, like, a bunch of stats on her, and it says, like, "Jubilee, 5 foot, 90 pounds." I was like, "That girl's teeny tiny." I'm like, "Please tell me she's, like, 10 years old because you can't be, like, a teenager and be, like, 90 pounds.
Yeah, not
That's
healthy.
crazy." And so eventually we have, the X-Men come to save her. They realize that she, needs help. They take her to the school for gifted youngsters. One while she's at the school, she wakes up and she kind of like breaks out of her room, is looking around, trying to find her way out. We run into another mutant who we weren't introduced to in the opening credits, and we learn later on that his name is Morph and that he's a shapeshifter. And let me
Mhm.
tell you something, Dill. I hate Morph. I hate him.
Okay. Well,
I,
okay. Well, Morph is complicated because okay. Um,
okay.
Morph Morph is not, as far as I know, one of like the main X-Men. I believe they might have even been created for this series. Um,
Yeah.
I think Morph serves a very significant purpose though, and this is something that I think we take for granted nowadays in superhero films. And I don't know if this is part two or not, so we can kind of talk about them as a whole. But like, he dies. And I
Yeah.
think that just kind of goes to show that they're expendable. And obviously, because he's not in the title sequence, you kind of get a hint that he's not going to be a main player in this.
Yeah.
But I do think there's something to be said though about the fact that this children's television show on a Saturday morning cartoon in their pilot killed off one of their main team, and I think that's something that is so revolutionary that at the time was so big that we are not really talking about nowadays. But that was a huge deal for superhero media or television or cartoons in
Mm.
general. Like Scooby Doo would never kill off Shaggy in the first episode. Not
Mhm.
saying they're one
Yeah.
and the same, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I do think that's kind of why Morph is such an interesting figure. I do read a lot of the forums where people are like, if you can get past Morph's laugh, that first episode's great. If not, it sucks. Because Morph's laugh is annoying. But I do think his overall death is kind of what makes the X-Men so polarizing for the time, even more so than the
Yeah.
wokeness at the time, which was a little bit more metaphorical. This was more like, whoa, you did that in the first episode. Okay, all right, I see where
Yeah.
we're going. But
Yeah. He's their Phil Coulson. He's their,
mhm,
reason that they need something to avenge. Um
mhm,
And so this episode basically ends. We do meet one of our big baddies of our season. We kind of have this cast of villains that we have to keep track of. And one of them is this man named Guy Rich. And he's kind of working with the Mutant Control Agency.
yeah,
He's definitely on team. Like, we need to register all these mutants and they shouldn't be integrated in society. They need to be like locked up and thrown away.
mhm,
Hate these guys. So obviously the X-Men catch wind of this, and they're like, we need to now get rid of all these registration forms that the agency has, because they're just going to keep going after mutants and killing them or imprisoning them. So our episode kind of ends with them raiding the agency. And so episode 2, Night of the Sentinels part 2, starts with them destroying all the files. It's so funny that like Wolverine and Storm are just like physically destroying everything while Hank is over at the computer like, and now when I upload this virus, everything will be gone.
Which has always been the best thing about Hank, is that he is the brains, but he's also the bulk. It's the Hulk, literally. It's the same thing as the Hulk. It's like he's the smartest one, but he's also the like biggest guy that could probably rip you to shreds. Which is such a cool dichotomy.
Yeah, and then we also find out that Guy Ritchie is also working with with Trask, who we know as the big villain from Days of Future Past. You know, the live action movie, the film. And while escaping the agency, this is when they're attacked by 3 Sentinels, and this is when, you know, they did this in a really interesting way, Dale, where they kind of cut to black.
Yeah, they don't show the death.
Yeah, we find, you know, we start the next scene with them arriving back at the school, and Wolverine is all up in arms with Cyclops. He's like, how could you do that? Morph and Beast could still be out there. And Jean comes in and she's like, Morph isn't around anymore. I can't feel him. But like Beast is still alive, but we just don't know where he is. And let me just tell you, I'll make this point right here, right now. Jean Grey sucks in this series. They absolutely underutilize the shit out of her. She is so cool in the movies. She's cool in the prequels. She's cool in the sequels. She's a main player in all of the movies, basically. You know, she has a whole movie about her. It's called The Dark Phoenix. It's not a great movie, but it's about her. And she like comes in like once every other episode, uses her powers once, and then like fades. And then like Cyclops is there to be like, Jean. And she's like, oh. And he's like, are you okay? Like, she's basically a damsel in distress, and it's infuriating.
Yeah, well, I think there's a few reasons. I want to talk about this. So, we do have, later we're going to pick our most valuable mutant, our LVM, our least valuable mutant. She is my least as well. Assuming that's who you picked as your least. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
For those reasons, she is very much a damsel in distress, very much there to serve Wolverine and Cyclops' stories. That being said, knowing Dark Phoenix is the biggest storyline of the X-Men franchise, comics and films and all that stuff, I have been kind of looking at her as like one of those things where they're planting little seeds. And there's a moment in like the last few episodes in actual Days of Future Past when I know I'm skipping ahead, but when what's his name comes back from the future and is literally like, one of you is an assassin, and they're all kind of going around. Cyclops is like, it can't be Jean, and she goes, it can be any of us. There might be evil in any of us, Cyclops. Like, I know you love me, but that I was like, ooh, they're setting up Dark Phoenix. Like, I think they're gonna start to plant the seeds as it goes along, and I think it's gonna be like a very gradual snowball effect. Because I don't believe Dark Phoenix is until season 3 or 4, so I think it's gonna be a little while till we get the Dark Phoenix storyline. So I think they might just be building to it because they want to kind of you know, like really hit us over the head with it. And I don't think they want to come off too strong as Jean being this like big player, because I think they want to surprise us. But that being said, if you're just watching this first season, I agree. She's a very small player, and I it's a shame because all her stuff really is about Cyclops and Wolverine more than it is about her own agency, which I don't like. But that's also the 90s, which sucks. You know, I just feel like the women in general, except for Jubilee, because she's a kid, she's like, you know, new to this world. Even like Rogue, she has one great episode in the season, but like otherwise I feel like she's kind of underutilized too, where she's such a great part, like the Anna Paquin Rogue. So I'm just hoping we get a little bit more of all the women characters. I think Storm gets the most in this season, but even then, like, you know, her powers are way cooler than her actual like emotional arc, you know. But I do think, you know, Jean has the potential to be a better character now. But yeah, I agree. I think she's definitely underutilized in that first season, though I will also say she is the main reason we get all those great Wolverine memes that you see all over the internet. The sad Wolverine with like the picture torn in half and all that shit. Like, she's the main reason for the Wolverine memes. So like, you got to give her that as well. So
sure. What I will give this series is that we do get a message from the president in this episode, and the president is a woman.
Yeah. Look at that.
How
Take back
Like
everything I said. 90s are woke.
that
Woo!
they're ahead of their time in 1992. That's incredible. We have projects coming out today where we don't even depict the woman as a president. Even in fucking I feel like in Secret Invasion, they could have easily made the president a woman. Why did it have to be another white guy? Love Dermot Mulroney, but like he's got enough credits under his belt. He doesn't
Mm.
also need a Marvel movie.
Yeah, it sucks
Any
that it's like
or TV show.
the greatest supporting that guy, white guy. That makes it harder. But yes, I agree. Dermot
Yeah.
Mulroney, step aside. No, I love that guy. Yeah, sorry. Continue along with this episode because we got to move along.
So yeah, that's what I just wanted to get that out of the way with Jean Grey.
Yeah.
Just so disappointing. The woman is a president though, and oh, one of the quotes that I wrote down for this episode was what I gathered was Wolverine's catchphrase, which was "I go where I want to go."
Wolverine has so many great moments because it also is a kids' TV show, so you know exactly when he wants to curse, and he'll say something like a bunch of slimy watermelon fighter. You know, he'll just like say all these weird
Yeah.
words in place of curse words, which I just love Wolverine's little
Yeah.
one-liners. They're so good. A highlight for sure.
It's just like so funny how like he kept repeating that. They would be like, "Wolverine, where are you going?" You'd be like, "I go where I want to go." And I'm like, I don't think you're doing what you think you're doing with that line. Like it's very simple.
Mhm,
It's not like you're owning them in that moment.
mhm.
And so the X-Men end up rescuing Jubilee, who is getting interrogated by Trask about, the X-Men and all the mutants who helped her escape the mall. And so she basically ends this episode deciding for herself that like she needs to be a part of this group. She needs to go live at the school. She needs to like, learn how to control her powers and like more about who she is. And her foster parents, this was the other line that I wrote for this episode. Her foster mom says, are you ever gonna come back and visit? And Jubilee responds with, "Does a mall babe eat chili fries?" And I was just like, that line is
Uh,
so 90s. Like, that is the most 90s statement I've like the phrase mall babe. Like, that's so funny.
that is good.
Uh,
Uh,
so now we're on to episode 3 titled Enter Magneto. I wonder who's gonna be in this episode. Um Oh, and then also last episode we find out that Beast actually went to jail
yeah.
for being caught at the mutant control agency.
Hmm.
And this is one of my favorite things about this season is that like Beast goes to jail. Like we see him in episode 1 and 2 and then he's in jail for the rest of the season. And so he gets like offer to break him out of jail like multiple times and every time he's like, "Oh, no thank you." Like I'm he says cuz this is how this episode starts is with Magneto trying to break him out. And he's just in jail. He's content. He's got his books. He's reading. And Magneto's like, "Come on, like, what are you waiting for?" And he responds with, "Well, my day in court, actually," because he's waiting to like do this properly and
Yeah.
like go to his hearing. And he's like, "No, I need to show that like mutants can like follow the law and like people don't need to fear us because we will stand in front of a jury just like everybody else." And he just like he's like begging everyone. He's like, "Please let me just stay in jail. Like, guys,
Right.
leave me alone."
Yeah, because
I love his
it's
character.
also the political statement too of like I want to be
Yeah.
freed when mutants are free. Like I don't want to, have to, make it a world either dominated by humans or by mutants. I want us to coexist, which is the whole
Yeah.
X-Men MO. Which I think this episode, spoiler alert, this is my favorite episode because this is kind of
Okay.
where we get the most like of the political thesis of the show. I think because it's like Magneto saying
Yeah.
humans should die, and then the humans saying mutants should die, and then like the X-Men being the kind of the middle ground and saying like this is where we should all coexist, this is where we all should all like have harmony. And I think that's kind of where this episode and kind of the next one, like these two episodes together, they kind of make their own part one, part two, to make like this whole bigger statement on what the exact conflict with Magneto is, because you need to make Magneto a villain, but you also need to make it to where you understand his motives, like a Killmonger or like a Thanos. And we talked a lot about that with Ian McKellen in the live action, but or Michael
Yeah.
Fassbender, whichever one you choose. But that's why I think this episode is really good about like kind of just setting the stage for what the X-Men are all about in an interesting way. The action might not be as exciting, but I think this episode really gets to the core of what it has to say about everything.
Right. And Dills, now that you've brought up Ian McKellen and Michael Fassbender, I also want to say that although I really like how these characters that kind of became the blueprint, I think that a character that became enhanced by like the live action films and the
Is Magneto.
casting was definitely Magneto, but also Professor X. Like it's
Mhm.
throwing me off that Professor X isn't British in this show. Like I'm like he should be an old like
Mhm.
it should just be Sir Patrick Stewart. Like that's
Yeah.
just who it should be.
Yeah,
Like that
and we still
is
have 4
Professor X.
seasons. It might grow into something bigger and better. Who knows? No, who really
Yeah.
knows? But I do think, yeah, and that's the hardest thing is we keep trying to compare it, but it's also like Cyclops was never like the head of the team in the originals. It was
Right.
always kind of like Wolverine, but now it's like no, Cyclops is like the second in command behind Professor X. So it's really just so interesting how some of the dynamics are
Yeah.
different, but I like it. It keeps it a little fresher, even though
Well,
this
I
is
wouldn't
older.
even say that Wolverine is like the head of the team because I feel like he makes it very clear in his arc that like he doesn't want to be any kind of leader. He doesn't want to be on a
Right,
team.
right.
But I
I
think
think it's
that
because he's the
this
breakout character. He was the highlight of those
yes.
movies, kind of deal.
No,
Yeah,
for sure. He's definitely like the breakout, the standout, because like Cyclops doesn't have any of his own movies. He just exists in
yeah.
like all the X-Men films where it's like,
Mhm.
Wolverine was just like the big headliner. But I really like how they kind of establish this like distinct like hierarchy difference between the two of them because it makes the tension between the two of them even better.
Right.
Um and so in this episode, Beast is unfortunately denied bail, so he does
Mhm.
have to go back to jail, which he's fine with. He has his books. And Sabretooth shows up, the character that we know and love from X-Men Origins, the
Know and
Wolverine.
love? We know him.
Um, you know what I mean? It's an
Yeah.
expression. And
Alright.
so he shows up and the mutants are like, "Oh, another mutant. We must house him and take care of him and rehabilitate him in our school." And Wolverine's like, "Actually, no, fuck this guy. I would rather if he weren't here. He's evil. Let's get rid of him." And
Mm.
so this is the line that I wrote down for this episode that kind of made me go like, because Wolverine says it to Professor X when he's trying to convince the team, like, no, we have to get rid of him. I don't like him. Like, respect my boundaries. But meanwhile, they're also in the midst of this going after Magneto. So
Mhm.
Wolverine says to Professor X, "How come we got to trash your enemy, but we got to go easy on mine?" And I
Mm.
was like, that's
Yeah.
so true, Wolverine.
Yeah. I
That's so
really
true.
I really like the Wolverine Sabretooth dynamic here. Sabretooth himself is a little annoying. I'm like, all right, chill.
Yeah.
But I do think the dynamic's very interesting because they don't really explore the background between the two, but I don't think they have to. And we might get some later. Like we do get an episode all about Wolverine and Sabretooth, but I don't think they
Hmm.
ever really dive into exactly what the problem is, but it's very clear there's a rooted rivalry, which I kind of like. It's again, like you said, like it doesn't feel like there's any traditional pilot. They're not trying to
Yeah.
spoon feed us any exposition. We're just trying to see these naturally unfold as if we were just living life with them, which I really like. Because sometimes there's just those enemies you can't explain, and the rivalries and the heated rivalries, especially for Wolverine, who's such a heated character. Like, I think the Sabretooth dynamic's really cool.
That's what I'm saying, Dill. Like they never spell anything out for the audience like right away, which was like kind of the point I was making before in episode 2 when they come or episode 1 or 2 when they come back from like the big battle with the Sentinels where Morph dies. Like yes, I get that they might have just not wanted to show a death on a children's show, but also they just presented it in a really unique way where it's just like we the audience were kept in the dark, but because like Wolverine and Cyclops are fighting about it, we know that something bad happened here. And then we watch it kind of in flashbacks through Wolverine's like point of view later on in the episode. And I just think that it's not all laid out nice and neat from the get-go. And so
Mhm.
we, the audience members, there's a element of mystery to it where we have to kind of figure out like what's going on like some of the time. So it's just like, you
Right.
know, trusting that your audience is like smart is like also
Yeah.
like a way to make great content. You know what I
For sure.
mean?
For sure. Hmm.
Because what was I just? I was complaining about something recently where they were like spelling too much out for me. Oh, I think it was Madam Web actually. So like we don't have to talk about it. Um, so basically, the big battle in this episode is that Magneto is trying to get his hands on some nuclear missiles. Basically, the way that they end up defeating him is Professor X kind of gets into his mind, so it just kind of like spooks him. He's like, "No, don't show me flashbacks to the war." They never say this a specific war, but we just know a war. And so he's like, "Oh, you're showing me flashbacks to the war." And so he kind of just like flies away, and then Storm has to stop the missiles. And that is the end of episode 3. Episode
Mhm,
4, entitled Deadly Reunions, is all about them trying to get through to Sabretooth.
mhm.
We realize we also learn of something that comes up quite a few times throughout the episodes in this series, is that Storm is claustrophobic.
Yeah,
Um we
which do you like that?
Well, I think it's
I mean,
just
not
like,
like that, but, you know,
I mean, I get that they kind of wanted to give her maybe like some sort of character flaw, because she does seem like a very she's
overpowered.
definitely yeah, she's definitely very the most like well put together, and if not, like if Cyclops isn't in command, then I feel like she's the second in
Yeah.
command for the
Mhm.
team. So I feel like they just wanted to give her something that would kind of like not make her so invincible, which
Yeah.
I
You
liked.
need the
I just
kryptonite for Superman, and that's kinda like the
Yeah.
thing is she's got such great honestly, the best action sequences in this whole season are Storms. Like, the
Yeah.
way they are able to animate them are so much better than live action, which was never able to serve that character well, but here, I love the animation that they do with the storm attacks and stuff. I actually like it a lot because, A, I mean, the phrase lightning in a bottle, you know? And B,
Oh,
just the
okay.
idea that you need to, like you said, kind of find a way to give her a flaw because she's so kind of overpowered and so poised and so well put together, that it's just cool to see these characters have weaknesses in general because it makes them more human, you know? So I like the choice, though it is a little
Yeah.
like, I don't know, sometimes it comes out of nowhere. It's like, guys, wait, Storm's claustrophobic, you know, like it's just kind of,
Yes. Oh my god,
I don't know.
I that was one of the lines that I wanted to write down. I think I wrote down a different line from that
Yeah.
episode, but I was like, "Where's the claustrophobic line that I heard before?"
Mhm.
Because that's got to go in the video. We have to talk
Right.
about that. It was just so funny. They were like mid battle, and a bunch of rubble fell on her, and Cyclops was like, "Guys, wait, Storm's claustrophobic," and then they started digging through the
Yeah,
rubble
it's
for her.
it's silly, but hey, it
Yeah.
adds just more to the personalities of these characters, which I like. So yeah.
For sure. So we start this episode again with like Wolverine being very anti helping Sabretooth in any way. And I think Professor X said something along the lines is like, stop, like you need to give me time to like penetrate his recesses or something. And then Wolverine like gets out his claws. And this is the line I wrote down for this episode where he just says, I'll penetrate his recesses.
Mhm. Mhm.
Very funny.
Yep.
This is also the episode where I made the note that I realized I was like, wow, Rogue might be the horniest character on the show, because
Yeah.
all of her quips are about men. Like she's always
Mhm.
like, all right, tall drink of water, sugar. Like all of her things
It's
are
also
like,
very
all
southern, which is
like,
funny. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. She's like all of her like quips that she comes out, even when she's fighting, are like very flirtatious, or are always commenting on like the man she's fighting. And
Mhm.
this is like especially true like later on. I think I wrote down something that she said for one of my quotes. Um and you know, we also get this like back and forth between her and Gambit of like him always flirting with her, and her being like, you know, I can't touch you, so like why are you talking to me that way?
Yeah.
And
Gambit's a
so
little flirt too. Gambit and Rogue are
yeah,
kind of like the teenagers. They feel like, even though
yeah,
I don't really know the ages of these people, like I feel like they're kind of like the more rebellious ones, which is fun because like Rogue is so kind of
yeah,
innocent in the live action Anna Paquin
yeah.
version, where it's cool to see this take on it, but it's so different, you know. So I'm
Yeah.
still trying to get used to it, but
I also liked how they showcased what Rogue's power can even be, because I feel like from what we learned of the live action movies, all we know is that if she touches people, she hurts them. But in
right,
this version, we there's like another layer to it where it's like she actually just takes the
consumes their
energy
power.
of
Yeah,
whoever, and she takes over their powers. We
yeah.
saw
It's
that she
Kirby,
took
Kirby and Super Smash Bros. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. She just
yeah,
has to
yeah.
inhale everyone she
Uh-huh.
sees. Um, which I thought, I was like, that would have been such a cool added layer to
Mhm.
like give to that character, because then she would
Right.
have been like so much more useful. Although, remind me, correct me if I'm wrong, Jill, doesn't Rogue actually get cured in the live action movies?
Um, it's been so long, but I don't know. I feel like every time I think about Rogue storyline, I confuse it with Sprites from Eternals, so I'm not 100%
Oh,
sure.
okay.
Because I know Sprite gets basically like transformed back into just a
Humanized.
regular human, but I don't
Yeah.
know. I can't remember. Someone will let us know in the comments, but like, yeah, I don't know.
Because I think that's what Anna Paquin's journey is. I think that she just wants to be normal so bad that I think she gets cured, I think. Um, and so this episode kind of ends with Jubilee setting Sabretooth free, because for some reason all the X-Men left and Professor X was like, "Child, you must watch the villain.
Yeah.
You must watch this unhinged character at the school
Yeah.
now."
I feel like
And
after episode
so
1, they kinda just don't really know what to do with Jubilee.
yeah.
Because honestly, her powers are fun, but, how many times are fireworks useful? As we saw in Madam Web, they're really not. So I don't know. I don't know how useful Jubilee is gonna be going forward, and maybe that's why she's not part of the live action ones. I don't know. I just keep having to
Yeah.
think to myself, like, why Jubilee, not in the live action when she's, like, the focal point of the first half of the season? I don't know.
Right. And it's just so interesting that she, like, later on in the season, she'll start like vocalizing. She's like, "Guys, I'm not a kid anymore. I want to go on missions. I want to do things." And then they give her responsibility and she always fucks it up. So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I'm I'm
Yeah.
like, Jubilee, you have some growing to do.
Yeah. Alright,
Um
let's move along.
so yeah. Um anyway, so the next episode is episode 5, Captive Hearts.
Mhm.
And so this one, oh yeah, so this
This is
is
the
the
love
one
triangle.
where,
Yeah.
yes, where Cyclops and Jean Grey go on their little date. They actually
Mhm.
went to go see Phantom of the Opera, which I thought was a choice. It must have been like really big on Broadway that year or
I mean,
something, that they were
it
like
was big on
Phantom of
Broadway
the
for, like,
Opera.
30 years, yeah, so, it must have still just been the hot thing where, like, this is timeless, even though now
Right.
it's not. Yeah.
And so they stumble across a mutant who we later find out his name is Leech, and so he's getting kind of like tormented by this group of humans. They follow him to like make sure that he's okay, and they stumble upon this group of mutants that live underground in the subway system of New York City called the
Yeah.
Morlocks. And so the
Mhm.
Morlocks are kind of these group of mutants that have been so transformed by their mutation that they can't live among regular society, which is a really
Mhm.
interesting storyline, I feel like, to tackle. Um for like, I would really like to see this in a live action movie later down the line. Now that we know that we're
Right.
getting more X-Men stories, I think that this is an interesting one to introduce.
Yeah.
And so we meet the leader of this group. Her name is Cali Cagliostro. I'm trying to say Cagliostro, which is from Doctor Strange, but that's not her
That's not
name.
it, no.
Her name is Calestro, maybe something like that. And so now she kidnaps uh Jean Grey and Cyclops because she's like, I need to bear in air for to run this group of mutants down here. And so she basically wants Cyclops to impregnate her, which is what I gathered from
Yeah.
this episode, which was crazy. I will say though that this episode uh like utilized Jean Grey the best, because we actually got to see her use more of her
Right.
powers and her not immediately passing out
Right.
post using them.
Mhm.
Um, I also think that it was like a great way to showcase Wolverine kind of like pushing his like feelings aside about the fact that Jean
Yeah.
Grey and Cyclops are together. So
Yeah.
he,
Sad
had to push
Wolverine.
away.
Yeah. Mhm.
Exactly. That was so silly, goofy when
I
he's
know.
just sitting there with the picture of them, like,
Oh, yeah, it's a
oh
meme. It's a meme. I knew the meme before I knew who Wolverine was. Like, the meme is
yeah.
so good. Yeah.
And so the X-Men end up saving her, but once again, this is like they utilize Storm the best, but like at what cost? Because this episode ends with Storm and the main woman of the gang having a late lightsaber battle
Yeah.
with these two things, and Storm is able to uh you know beat her, and at the end of this episode Wolverine just like takes off, putting
Yeah.
his putting himself aside for the day to save Jean and Cyclops was too much for him. He has to go wander off into the wilderness, which brings us into episode 6, Cold Vengeance, which is kind of where it's basically an episode where Wolverine is off doing like a wilderness retreat with this group of like native people he's like stumbled upon who are like they're teaching him his way, their ways, and he's kind
Canada.
of like and then on the B plot of this episode, Gambit, Jubilee, and Storm are all investigating the island of Genosha, which I couldn't help but think of Genovia from the Princess Diaries, but don't be fooled, people. It's 2 different places.
No. I know you're all confused about that, but don't be fooled.
And so they're investigating Genosha because Gambit just really wants to take a vacation. So they're like, look, they're really accepting of mutants here. Maybe we should go here. And Professor X is like, all right, go check it out. Let me know what you find.
Yeah, which is basically set up for the next episode, whereas Wolverine's plot is more settled in this one. Because the Genosha one kind of trickles into the next episode more so with the slaves.
Yeah. Exactly. Like, this is what I'm saying, Dill. Like, they all kind of like bleed into the next. Like, they're all very like continuous. Like,
it's good.
It's no, I love it. I'm enjoying it. I was pleasantly surprised during this entire watch through that I did. The quote that I wrote down for this episode was when the natives stumbled upon Wolverine and they were like, wow, you were in the ice a really long time. Like, you really shouldn't have healed this quickly. And he was like, yeah, well, I'm a mutant.
Well, and I think that's it's funny, but it's also like it's kind of gets again to the core of the show where these people don't even know what mutants are. They just take him in for who he is, and that's kind of like the whole message is like they can coexist. Like, this is where we see they can coexist, and it's someone like Wolverine who is the hardest to coexist with that has a storyline, which I think is so important. That they make him be the character that shows that he can get along with the regular people just fine, except for a few. But that's that's Wolverine. But it really this community taking him in is even more impactful than like if they were to take Jean Grey in or something. Like they're taking in this kind of hot-headed, temperamental guy, and then obviously he fights with them and for them. But I thought this was a really cool story arc for Wolverine because it gave him more character than just the kind of angry guy.
And I also think that it's like important to say that I think it's very purposeful that like it's this group of like very isolated people that aren't necessarily getting fed the news and the propaganda and all the negativity like surrounding the mutants that like just meet one and they're like, okay, well, let's just like vibe together then. You know what I mean? Like, they don't have all of this extra baggage of like the knowledge of what mutants are perceived to be. They just kind of accept him for who he is, which I think was a really lovely way to tell this story. And so Wolverine and Sabretooth fight again. It ends with Sabretooth dying in a trench. But it does end on a to be continued, which makes sense because episode 7 is called Slave Island. Because as we discovered in episode 1, we kind of get the vibe right away on Genosha that something hinky is going on. And it's the fact that Gyrich and Trask both have their Sentinel like factory on this island of Genosha. And they've basically been trapping and enslaving the mutants that go there to help them build a dam to make their factory run better so that they can make their Sentinel. So they're basically using mutants to make the killing mutant machines, which is crazy.
Yeah, so again, if you are in 2024 complaining that X-Men 97 is political, there's a episode called what is it called? Slave Island?
Slave Island.
Yeah, okay, there we go. It's always been political, and this is another example of it, just all the different ways that the social issues are coming to light,
This is when Storm's claustrophobia comes to a head because she tries to lead a rebellion. It gets shut down immediately because they're all wearing collars that stop them from using their powers. And she gets trapped in a box for most of this episode. Also, Gambit is like perceived to be this like shady figure that maybe he's betraying the X-Men, but then it comes out that he was just tricking the evil people into thinking that making them think that he was on their side.
Right.
And so
which is important for later, which is important for Days of Future Past for sure.
Right. And so him and Jubilee are able to save Storm at the end of this episode, and they end up freeing all the other mutants and destroying the dam so that the water crashes into the Sentinel factory and seemingly, who knows, destroys. It looks like it destroys some of the Sentinels. Maybe we'll find out later on. So now we're on to and the quote that I wrote down for this episode was when one of the guards yelled at Gambit, "You go break rocks," because it sounded like, it's like the expression like "go kick rocks."
Yeah,
I want to start saying that to people again. Go kick rocks.
Cool.
Episode 8, The Unstoppable Juggernaut. This was a very good episode. So the Professor X is out running some errands, and at the end of episode 7, all the X-Men come back from the island of Genosha to find that the school has been destroyed. It's just a pile of rubble, which made me think of the line from Deadpool when teenage Negasonic Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Warhead says the line, "Oh, it's just like the school that gets destroyed every other year and then magically rebuilt." And I was like, this is the blueprint for that. And so they're out, the X-Men are out and about trying to figure out who destroyed their school. And so they run into Colossus from Russia, who is working as a construction worker because he's all big and strong and can get the job done really easily. And they're like, you must have done it. But it wasn't Colossus. He's just a big friendly giant. He wouldn't hurt a fly unless that fly did something really shitty to him. And so they're kind of out and about, and they kind of catch Colossus in the midst of being arrested for a bank robbery. But we find out that it wasn't Colossus who did this bank robbery. He's innocent. It was actually, guess who did it, Dill?
Oh, you want me to actually guess?
Yeah, well, I just want you to say the name because his name was in the title of this episode.
Oh, Juggernaut. Yeah. So I thought you were trying to get the viewers to guess.
No, I just wanted you to complete my sentence.
Well, there you go.
Because you complete me, Dill.
Thanks.
Thanks. And so the rest of the episode is spent with them trying to prove Colossus's innocence. He's in the same prison that Beast is in. This is another incident where they're like, "Hey, Beast, want to escape prison with us?" And he's like, "No, I'm good. Thank you, though. I'm just awaiting my my court date, so I'll be here." And so they take on the Juggernaut. He's really too big and strong, so they realize they can only take him down with his mind. They rip off his helmet. Jean Grey puts a hypnosis trance on him where he forgets who he is and what he's doing. This is, again, another example of her using her power once and then passing out into Cyclops' arms. Episode 9, The Cure. Another very good episode. 2 heavy hitters, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
So this is when we my first note was horny couple for some reason. I was like, what was I talking about here? And it's because this episode opens with a woman and Warren Worthington III seemingly about to get hot and heavy in this cabin when Warren's like, "I think you should go. We can't be doing this. You don't know who I truly am. I'm ashamed. I'm a mutant. I gotta go." And Cable shows up. I forgot to mention that Cable was in the Slave Island episode as well.
Briefly,
yeah. So he's just kind of, Cable's doing Cable's thing, and he's just like, bouncing around episode to episode, just taking out all these people who are a threat to mutants. And he's like, "I'm just gonna kill them." Like, he is like no moral compass. Like, everything is very black and white for Cable. It's like, you're either alive and you're a good person, or you're a bad person and you're dead. So pick one. So he shows up. Everyone's looking for this Professor Godfrey Adler, who has apparently discovered a cure for mutants. And now he's advertising this cure for mutants for people to be normal. Everyone's like, who would want to do that? And meanwhile, Rogue is like, well, maybe I would want to do that because I want to know the touch of another human being.
Right.
So Rogue, this is all about Rogue's journey and how she kind of comes to term with like being who she is, because even though she does not get to touch anyone. She kind of realizes at the end of this episode that, like, but my powers make me an extraordinary human being. And, she's able to save people because of who she is. So she doesn't want to take it away. But obviously it doesn't even matter because this cure isn't even real, because the professor, or the doctor is, Dr. Adler isn't even real, because it's just Mystique pretending to be him, working for Apocalypse, because they're trying to recruit as many mutants as they can into working for Apocalypse's evil plan, which is just like world domination.
Right.
I will say, though, Apocalypse and Oscar Isaac's Apocalypse in the titular film X-Men Apocalypse is much better than this goofy looking guy. He's like part robot, part human. He kind of has like an ape face. Like he has this like lip thing going on that like it's like this dark purple shading that like goes up to his like hair, and it just like it's giving like ape, but also he's a robot. So I don't really understand what's going on here. So I like Oscar Isaac's Apocalypse better. I mean, say what you will about that movie, but
these Apocalypse bars are set very low. I don't think either is particularly
very true.
But yeah.
So now we're on to episode 10, Come the Apocalypse, right? Did I just... Yeah. Episode 10.
Yeah, we're almost done.
We're cruising on by here. This one is Come the Apocalypse. Come the Apocalypse. To the Apocalypse we go. And so now this episode opens with Warren, talking so highly about how he got the cure. He's normal. He's like, speaking to a bunch of mutants who are kind of like not really sure about being mutants. So they're like, if you do this, you're going to feel normal. So just come do this with me. But then we find out, because it's not a cure, he was actually just made into this evil, angry version of Warren, the Archangel. And so, they make him and the 4 horsemen of the Apocalypse, which I think is a very fun name, because the name of the villain is Apocalypse, and they are his horsemen.
Right.
And so they just kind of start like fucking shit up for everyone. The X-Men have to stop them and figure out how to cure them. And it comes full circle, Dill, because they end up being able to cure Warren through Rogue's power. She touches him, she takes on all his anger and such, and he's able to snap out of it and like be Warren again. So thank God she wasn't cured, because then they wouldn't have been able to cure him.
Yeah, it's a good full circle moment for her, for sure.
Which is, I like her. Anyway.
I do too.
Yeah. Because I was going back and forth with who my MVM is going to be, and I think I just decided who it is.
Okay.
So episode 11, this is now part 1 of Days of Future Past. So basically, it's it's very, very similar to the film. They're trying to stop the future from going to shit. It does open in the year 2055, which was very far away in the year 1992. But I'm here to let you know that it's actually only 30 years away. Yeah. So we there's a very good chance that we'll both be here in the year 2055.
For perspective, we are closer to that year than we are to when this episode came out.
Right. I'm going to throw up. So essentially, the mutants have to stop an assassination from happening, because if it never happens, then people never turn on mutants and this chaos never ensues. The only difference, though, with this episode, and I don't know, Dale, how you felt about it, I know how I sure felt about it, is that it's not Wolverine who goes back to the past to fix everything. It's this random guy named Bishop. Right.
Yeah.
And so Bishop spends his whole time trying to convince the mutants, like, oh, I'm from the future, I'm here to kill one of you. And we end up finding out at the end of this episode that it's Gambit, actually, which is a shock to us all.
I think the reason it's not Wolverine is because if Wolverine were to do it, everyone would be like, okay. Whereas if it's this other guy, there's that added like, oh, mystery of, is he telling the truth or is he fucking with us? Which I think is important, because then Bishop also, or Gambit, sorry, has a big conundrum too, because he's like, I wouldn't do that, but now everyone's like, well, who do we to trust? And I think Gambit's a perfect person for that, because we've seen Gambit come across shady at times, even though he really isn't. And I think he's the person that is the most sus, even though he's not, which I think is really important. which, you know, and it's great because it shows that Gambit, you know, this episode is very big about Gambit trying to like show his worth to the team, and us as the audience accepting that he is a team player, and he is, you know, him and Wolverine are the most kind of bad boys, you know, so it's cool to see him get like this bit of redemption through this suspicion of him, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we end this episode with the big reveal. We then move on to episode 12, Days of Future Past Part
Mhm.
2. And so Professor Professor X like doesn't go fuck in this episode. He's like, "Well, I have to go to Washington for a Senate hearing. Why don't you three guys just stay here and everything will like work out?" And I'm like,
Right.
Professor X, I'm like, you're leading them right to the scene of the crime. Like it's just so silly.
Yeah, and
So
like we knew where this was going because like you know there's so many shapeshifters in X-Men at this point. We've already met Mystique and Morph and like
yeah,
Rogue who can absorb powers. So like we know that's probably the outcome just because you know we know where this is going. We've also seen the movie, so like we know that this is at least an idea they like to tempt with. But yeah, I thought this
yeah,
was really interesting because it's like if you just don't go, then it won't happen, you know. And that's where I was like, there's gonna be a
right.
shapeshifter. Like I called
Yeah.
that, but I didn't necessarily call who it was gonna be because I forgot
Well,
that we had just been you know shown Mystique before a few
yeah.
episodes back, but like it didn't quite click to me yet. But um,
Well, honestly, Dill, because she's hasn't been such a key player in this series, my radar was not on Mystique at all.
mhm,
I knew that like Gambit couldn't have done it because I was like, that's too easy. Like, I don't think that he's
yeah,
like the actual assassin, but I just wanted to know like how
my
this is gonna play out.
Yeah, my biggest suspicion was Rogue only because she had that power to absorb powers. I'm like, maybe she absorbed
Mm,
Gambit's power, you know? I don't know.
mm,
But then also
interesting.
they do the Jean Grey hint where she's like, any of us are capable of evil, and I'm like, Dark Phoenix. But I was like, they wouldn't do that now.
Yeah.
But you know, just one of those things, you know. But also the one thing I don't like about this is like this whole thing about like let's go back in time to prevent this one assassination from happening. Okay, but like you're not going to go back and fix Dark Phoenix, which we also know happens, you know, like all these other
Mm,
things that happen. Like, so if you can just do this, why didn't you do this for everything? I don't know, but that's kind
mm.
of just a comic book problem in general. Like, you know, they should have gone back even
Yeah.
further. I don't know.
That's the problem with introducing time travel in general to anything is
Yeah,
that it's just so convoluted. Then you start to okay, you start to poke holes in it and
yeah,
realize that like, oh, well, then why didn't you do this thing? And then
yeah. That was my big
it's
frustration with this episode. Yeah,
it's reminiscent of like the argument that people made about the Eternals. It's like, okay, well then why weren't they there to help stop Thanos? And then why didn't
yeah,
they
yeah,
try to intervene with like anything else? You know what I mean?
yeah,
Um so basically like as we've been saying, this episode kind of ends with us realizing that it was Mystique who took on the form of Gambit to make it look like a mutant had killed the senator so that people would turn on mutants. But luckily everyone kind of, the real Gambit and then Bishop show up to kind of stop this from happening. And what was really weird to discover in this episode was the whole Mystique becoming Rogue's mom
yeah.
question
And that's
mark.
so the or no, wasn't it Jubilee's mom or Rogue's mom?
No, Rogue's mom.
Rogue's mom, yeah, yeah. So it's like, yeah, Rogue's foster mom was really Mystique this whole time. That was weird. I agree. Because we hadn't gotten that established. We saw Jubilee's
Yeah.
foster parents in the premiere, but we hadn't seen much of
Yeah.
Rogue and her parents. So it just kind of came out of
Yeah.
nowhere. But I guess it adds a little complexity to the character. I guess they're just trying, and maybe that's the thing for the comics that it's just fleshed out
Right.
better. But yeah, it was a little weird. I think they could have just made
Well,
him, you know, Mystique having her own, you know, motives and shit. But I don't
yeah. I mean, I guess they didn't want to like kill Mystique off because, she's such a great character to like, just like
know. Hmm.
have. Um, but it was just so weird. She's like, "Well, you're not gonna hurt me, not when I look like this." And I'm like, okay, do you think Rogue's fucking stupid? Like she knows that's not her real mom. But then I guess it was to say, like, oh no, like I have just been your mom this whole time. And
Right.
like
Weird.
this is just the form that I took to raise you. And so, Rogue helps her kind of escape. And I guess that's the duality of Mystique. Um and so, how does this episode end? Oh yeah, so then Senator Kelly goes missing. He's gone. Because Bishop goes back to the future and everything's still the same. And he's like, "Oh, well, I stopped the assassination. Like, what else?" And he's like, "Well, I guess Forge, the guy that he's with, is like, well, I guess something else happened later
Yeah.
down the line that we also have to stop from happening. So
Mm.
I think it has something to do with the fact that Senator Kelly is missing at the end of this episode, and the fact that Professor X says my watch has been magnetized.
And then another to be continued. Yep. Yep.
So now we have our season finale of X-Men, episode 13, The Final Decision. And it's all about this, the X-Men trying to figure out where the Senator's been off to. They're conflicted about saving him because he's been so vocal about,
Mhm.
not supporting mutants. And they're like, why would we save our enemy? And Professor X is like, this is exactly why we're going to save him, because we're going to prove to people that, like, we mean them no harm.
Which is a
Um,
great idea. Great idea.
Yes. And so they end up finding out that he's been taken by the Master Mold. His name is literally Master Mold because it's the giant sentinel that's been generating all these new sentinels. And he's been kidnapped by him. Master Mold plans on kidnapping a bunch of leaders because he's going to replace all of their brains with robot brains so he can control all of them. And so the X-Men Jean is able to rescue um the Senator. I think this is the episode where we got the claustrophobic line. Um
Yeah,
we also
maybe.
got a moment where I forget which episode this happened in, but Rogue had to kiss Cyclops at some point. Not kiss him. She was giving him mouth to mouth, and then like
Right.
adopted his powers and was like shooting lasers out of her eyes, which I thought was cool. But then at the end of this episode, so after they destroy the mastermind, they save the Senator. He announces his allegiance to the mutants, that he supports them, and he's changed his whole mind. He's like, yeah, bad mutants should be reprimanded, but we shouldn't stand against those who are trying to stand with us. Rogue actually does give Gambit a little kiss through her hand. She puts
I thought it was cute. Yeah. Mhm.
her mouth over her hand, kind of like a stage kiss, which I thought was sweet. Oh,
Mhm.
Beast gets, because there's no more war on mutants, Beast gets freed from jail, so
Right.
he's reunited with the X-Men. And then this also ends with Scott and Jean. And this is the first time we only ever hear them. They don't use each other's real names quite often. I think Jean only calls Cyclops Scott once throughout the entire series. And in this moment at the end is actually not that time, because Scott proposes to Jean and it's like, will you marry me? And first of all, she calls him by his,
Superhero
mutant
name.
name, which is Cyclops. And she goes, Cyclops, if we have children, they'll have the same struggles that we did. Which is interesting because I'm like, well, he just proposed to you. Like, just because you're getting married, that doesn't mean you need to have children, first of all.
Right.
And
Right.
and second of all, he responds with, well, I wouldn't have it any other way. Really? You wouldn't have it any other way? Like, maybe in a way where they don't struggle their whole lives like you did? Like, it was just such
Yeah.
a weird exchange. But the most important thing that we discover at the end of this episode is that they're actually being watched, and it's very WandaVision. It zooms out
Mhm.
on a TV screen that is filming this exchange between Jean and Scott, and we find out that someone is watching them, and that person refers to themselves as Sinister.
Yeah.
So I think that is definitely our teaser for season 2.
Yeah, which I love because I think this finale really ties things up with a nice bow, like the whole mutant human thing, which I think will reopen itself later. But the idea that like Beast is out of jail now, like the Senator's on board now a little bit more with mutants, and like Magneto's like, "Oh, we'll be back," gonna take some
Yeah.
time off. But then we still
I'll be
introduce another
back.
villain, so we can continue if we wanted to. And I think by now they knew they were gonna make more because it's cheap to make these because it's animated and it's
Yeah.
it was very popular at the time. It came out on Halloween, but it ran throughout the holiday season and it was very popular. So very excited for season 2. I think this is off to a great start. I've heard the first 3 seasons are better than the 4th and 5th, but I heard the new season that's on Disney Plus airing now is really good. So I'm just really excited for this whole journey. Really quickly though, let's talk about our MVM and our LVM. I already said my LVM was Jean Grey. Not because I don't like Jean Grey, it's just because I think the story has underutilized her and underserved her. My MVM is gonna be Wolverine, just because I think he has the most interesting story arc of these seasons, and I think he's just
Mm.
such a fun, memorable presence. But yeah.
My LVM, I couldn't agree more, Dill, is also Jean Grey. I just think that it's so sad that this cool badass character that we know and love is just so mistreated in this series. Um,
Mhm.
I I probably gave it away before, but my MVM has got to be Rogue. I think that she really grew on me. I think that, yeah, is she a little male gazy with like all of her quips about like, commenting on men and like, all that stuff? Sure. But I think that just like the growth that she has in those 2 episodes that revolve around the cure, and that the fact that her power is so much cooler than I initially thought it was going into this. Um, I just think that she's like a really, really cool character
Yeah.
that's like utilized like pretty solidly. Like I think that in the lineup of like people who get like really cool moments, I think it's like Storm, and then I think that she's a very close second, and then I think right under her is Cyclops. I think those are the 3 main players that get like really cool like actiony stuff.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
and just are utilized the most on
Yeah.
missions in general. Did you
Yeah.
have you said that your favorite episode was
Yeah.
episode 3?
Yeah, I mean, like, just the whole entering of Magneto, like, into the story, I think just adds so much to the overall
Yeah.
idea of it, and you have the Hank trial and all that stuff. So I guess that was, like, my favorite, but I just really like looking at the season as a whole as one big thing. I think some of the most interesting stuff that also comes from that Rogue episode, The Cure, but, like, I don't think there's one that, like, stands above the rest. I think it's just very consistently
Yeah.
good. So I think when we rank the seasons, I might put the season very high as a whole. I don't know if there's one episode though that stands out above the rest. So I think just the Magneto
Yeah.
dynamic is the more impactful thing for me. What
Yeah.
is your number one episode? Your favorite?
I would say my favorite episode is actually the Unstoppable Juggernaut. I just
Cool.
think I love the character of Colossus, so I love that
Hmm.
we got to see him in this and how he's like pretty much exactly the way that he's depicted in Deadpool. Like I think that that's so cool that even a project as kind of like irreverent and unique and like very like stand on its own as Deadpool is, like they really stayed true to like the essence of who Colossus is, which is
Yeah.
basically just this like big friendly giant.
Hmm.
um
Cool.
and yeah, I really like that episode a lot.
Nice. Cool. Well, there you go. We did it. We covered the first season, and we will be back next week for season 2. It's the same amount of episodes, so it should be easy to get through. So on April 1st, we will be giving you that. Any other things to mention, Kels? Or are
I
we
would
good?
just say like I really like recommend doing this. Like I went into this and I was just like, okay, yeah, we'll watch the X-Men anime series. It's not gonna it'll be whatever. And I was really, really pleasantly surprised. Like I was really entertained by like the characters and all the storylines and how it gets presented. And I think that if you're a person who's just like, well, I just watch the main movies when they come out. I don't like watch like, yeah, sure, I watched WandaVision, but I didn't really like pay attention like to any of the other shows or anything. I'm like, definitely branch out and like consider like, going back and watching these things, even though that they
Absolutely.
are old or outdated at times. Like I think, they hold up. And like I think that especially now that we know we're getting more X-Men storylines with like the mid-credit scene with the Marvels, like I think that it's worth going back and like look like getting checking out these characters
Yeah.
and seeing
Yeah.
maybe like what's to come.
And I'll say right now, like the comics, there's so much to read. Where I think this is going to be a great way to like, if you want to know who these characters are, what their deals are, what their powers are, what their relationships are. This series is going to be like the perfect way to introduce yourself.
Hmm.
If you're an MCU fan who wants to get it ready for Deadpool 3, even because we don't know what's going to happen with the X-Men there. We know Wolverine's going to be in
Hmm.
his original yellow in that film. So, yeah, I'm really, or I shouldn't keep saying Deadpool 3, Deadpool and Wolverine. But yeah, I'm really excited to see how this kind of incorporates into the overall future of the MCU, because I think they're realizing that like people just want good stuff. They don't want stuff that's necessarily going to matter more in the future. They just want good stuff, whether or not that connects to anything else. So I think, maybe going back to square one and just focusing on what worked. I mean, this new animated series is getting rave reviews. There's a few people who say it's too woke, but everyone else who knows it's woke loves it. And so I'm excited to
Yeah.
even get to that, because that's new stuff capturing the old stuff we love. So I'm really excited. Cool. You can find us all down there below. We tease ourselves every time, but I have to go pee really bad. So I'm going to end this, and
Oh,
Kelsey's got to go to work. So thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you next week with season 2 of X-Men, the animated series. See ya.